Good morning. My name is Beth Patanzo, and I have the privilege of serving as the Senior Vice President of the college here at Guilford Tech, as well as a member of the Guilford Workforce Development Board. So it is Schlein Grant Symposium. Cameron Campus is one of 6 educational sites in Guilford County that we operate, and we serve 32 to 33,000 students annually, up in different orientations to meet the needs of people who come here to have their events. We've served, sorry for my voice this morning, we've served close to 20,000 guests last year and are on track to serve even more in 2020. For your convenience, there is a conference center map on page 37 of your program. It outlines where restrooms are, which is real important, usually at some point. It also will tell you where your breakout sessions are. On page 36 of the program is information about Wi-Fi connectivity. We have our Wi-Fi access is TitanNet, but it's also on page 36. And lastly, you're encouraged to connect via social media at #FLG Symposium. So that is all of those conference center specific details. But as I leave and go exit stage right, there is a woman standing in the back of the auditorium that you should see, and her name is Sarah Teague. She will stay and be here throughout your entire event. If there are any special needs, she will be here to help you with anything. So at today's symposium, we have all 23 workforce development boards in attendance and 53 of our 58 community colleges, which I think is a really wonderful thing. Additionally, we have some guests from other states, including South Carolina and Tennessee, and they're here to learn about the great work happening with Finish Line in North Carolina. So welcome to our people from out of state, too. Give yourselves a hand. So let me give you just a sampling of what that success looks like. In the first year of the program here at Guilford Tech, in collaboration with the Guilford County Workforce Development Division, we have provided a total of $167,000 to roughly 200 students in both credit and non-credit educational programs. Of the 197 students, because we're tracking it, we know that 93% have either already completed their credential or are on track to do so by the end of fall term 2019. In addition, those in the credit-based programs have done so with an average GPA of 3.0. So not only are these students finishing, but they're finishing strong. And I think that certainly is consistent with Governor Cooper's mission and vision for this program. So with that, I'm pleased to share a video message from North Carolina Governor Roy Cooper, welcoming you to the symposium. As you all know, Governor Cooper launched Finish Line Grants in 2018.
Good morning.
After hearing countless stories of community college students working hard to better their lives but getting thrown off course by a financial emergency, his vision for Finish Line Grants was to make sure a hospital bill or a car repair doesn't stop students in their tracks on their way to a good paying job. And that vision is the reason we are all here today.
Everyone, Good morning, everyone. I'm Governor Roy Cooper. Thanks for attending today's first ever Finish Line Grants Symposium. Last year, we launched Finish Line Grants after hearing too many stories of students getting thrown off track by financial hardships. Our vision was to ensure that no student drops out of training due to car repair or hospital bill or other financial emergency. All of you here today are working to realize that vision, and I'm so grateful for what you're doing. What we're hearing from students is that this small investment in their future is changing the course of their lives. Their stories are so powerful. Finish Line Grants are working, and more than 2,000 of them have helped students enter the workforce. But we know many more students are at risk, and getting finish line grants to them will play a critical role in fulfilling our goal of 2 million North Carolinians with a post-secondary degree or credential by 2030. I'm so proud of the work you're doing. Thanks for all that you continue to do to develop North Carolina's workforce. Have a great day.
It is next my privilege to introduce Liz Kraebel, Chief Deputy Secretary of the North Carolina Department of Commerce. In this role, she provides cross-functional strategic leadership on complex economic development projects and other areas of the agency's operations. Prior to joining the Department of Commerce, Liz has had 25 years of broad experience in a variety of corporate and legal settings. She served as corporate counsel for MCNC and Business Telecom, Inc., and worked for United Healthcare, where she navigated the novel regulatory and legal issues associated with the rollout of the Affordable Care Act. She is a valued member of the executive team who is able to work proactively to anticipate and minimize legal risk, develop challenging strategic planning, and provide advice on business issues. During her career, Liz has counseled boards of directors and management regarding corporate governance and business matters, handled complex litigation, negotiated and drafted contracts, protected intellectual property, and overseen corporate acquisitions and financial transactions. She graduated magna cum laude from Harvard University. She also graduated from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill School of Law, where she was the managing editor of the International Law Journal. Please welcome Liz Kraebel.
Good morning. I'm so proud to be here today on behalf of the Department of Commerce. It's been a team effort, as everyone will be saying all day long, but we have the community colleges, workforce development boards, the NC Works Career Centers, and the Division of Workforce Solutions, all pulling together to step up and make Finish Line grants a success. I've been delighted, as the governor mentioned, to hear about some of these stories and see what an impact we're making on people's lives. An interesting quote from the Buddha, actually, which I think is terrific in this situation. Helping one person might not change the world, but it could change the world for that one person. And I think that's really what the Finish Line grants are all about. You know, many of us could absorb the $500 or whatever car repair. It hurts a little. You know, for some people, it really kind of derails their whole life. And one thing that has been brought home to me as we hear these people's stories too, we're not just helping that one person, we're helping their whole family. And when you think about that, the impact is wider even than just what the numbers might suggest. I think I see some heads nodding. You all understand that. It helps that family, it helps that community, it helps everyone, and it's really the right thing to do. You know, as Secretary Copeland and I and others in the Department of Commerce go around the state and we try to get folks like Honeywell and other companies like that to move to North Carolina, the number one thing that people ask us about is workforce. They all want qualified, dedicated workers, and this is exactly what the community colleges are striving to provide for them, as well as our tremendous four-year institutions as well. So I want to thank everyone in this room, and lots of you who weren't able to make it today too, for all the hard work that you've put in to make this such a success. One of the people who I'd like to recognize for a moment, who is going to be surprised, I think, for a second, is Brenda Savage. Brenda, her tireless efforts, her wisdom, and her workforce development expertise have been invaluable. As the first Finish Line Grants Coordinator for the Department of Commerce, I'm sorry to say she is retiring, and these days will be coming to an end. As she prepares to spend time with her family and doing some amazing travels, I'd like to ask Brenda to come up here so we can give her a small token of our appreciation. Now it's my privilege to introduce our next speaker, Ray Covington. Ray is currently serving as the interim director for My Future NC. Over the past 30 years, Ray has worked across higher education in North Carolina, including most recently serving as the director of strategic partnerships for the Hunt Institute. He previously served as the assistant vice chancellor at UNC Greensboro and as the vice president for institutional advancement at Greensboro College. He earned his doctorate in education leadership from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. Please help me to welcome Ray.
Good morning. What a privilege and honor to be with you this morning and to be just at the very beginning of the discussion of this incredibly important work. First thing I would like to do is thank the John M. Belk Endowment. Chuck Kaler is sitting right there representing the endowment this morning, but also the Lumina Foundation. And I know there's a few representatives from the Lumina Foundation here also. Without their support for this event today, we wouldn't be here. So let's give them a round of applause. But I need to thank them for yet another reason, because about 2 years ago, the John M. Belk Endowment and the Lumina Foundation teamed up, discussed North Carolina's post-secondary attainment goals, said, hey, there's been a couple of attempts over the years to try to establish a goal for North Carolina. But there's a lot of starts. All of the people who have been around for a while in this room know that there's been a number of starts along the way, but nothing really stuck. Well, with the John M. Belk Endowment and the Lumina Foundation and the support of several other foundations, they were able to put together a leadership team that consisted of educators, business folks, workforce development folks, government folks, and formed the My Future NC Commission. That's 2 years ago. This commission was made up of all these folks from all over the state, and they met for a series of months and really studied and worked toward figuring out what would be the best post-secondary attainment goal for the state of North Carolina. They came up with their results, and on February 20th at NC State University, Governor Cooper, President Berger, Speaker Moore, the presidents of the university system, the community college system, the Independent College Association, the superintendent of schools, Johnson, business leaders, key philanthropists in the state, all stood on the same stage. Just imagine all of those folks in today's environment standing on the same stage, all saying, yes, this is the right goal for post-secondary attainment for North Carolina. 2 million by 2030. Ages 25 to 44 getting a high-quality certificate or an advanced degree. Well, that's easy. Let's set a goal. We know we're at 1.3 now, 1.3 million citizens. That's 49%. We know through the process we're going to grow to 1.6, but there is a 400,000 shortfall by 2030. We know that if we don't do anything, we're going to be 400,000 citizens short. Great to be able to say that from the state level, but the reality is the work gets done right here in this room. I want to thank you, all of you, for all that you were doing to make this a possibility, because we're just in the process of identifying all the bright spots throughout the state, in the community colleges, through the workforce boards. There are a lot of people doing wonderful, wonderful things across the state, but we don't have the right mechanisms in place to be able to celebrate and to lift those bright spots up. The commission finished their work. There's a new 501c3 organization, My Future NC, that has been put in place. The board is made up of those same folks, plus a few others that were on that stage in February. And they are putting together the larger systems to be able to make sure to work with everyone across the state, whether it's all the workforce development boards of the community colleges, the universities, private and public, the K-12, the health and human resources. We know that we all have to work together to be able to reach that 2 million by 2030. The chairs of the My Future NC 501c3 is Dale Jenkins, who is the president of Mass Mutual of North Carolina, and Peter Hans, the president of the community college system. Peter Hans, when he's talking about the work of post-secondary attainment, he talks about the Finish Line grants. In fact, he quoted, "The Finish Line grants are moving quality workers into high-demand jobs, but more importantly, these grants are helping our students achieve their goals." Folks, my philosophy, you have your faith and you have your family, but reaching out to others, helping them to reach their goals, what an awesome opportunity we all have. So it is a privilege for me to be here, and I look forward to being a part of hearing everything else that folks are talking about today. But I'm also pleased to since the February date, we've had a number of entities that have passed resolutions supporting the goal, including all of those organizations represented by the board members, but then also the North Carolina County Commissioners Association, the Superintendents Association, this past Friday, the North Carolina School Board Association. But what's been so exciting along some of the work that I've been doing is getting to know the North Carolina Workforce Development Boards Association. I am very pleased to be able to introduce Jeff Frederick, who is the president of the North Carolina Workforce Development Boards Association, but in his day job, he is actually the senior vice president of Global Human Resource Business Partnering at RTI International. Before joining RTI International, Jeff did lead human resources for employees from US, Canada, China, Belgium, and Indonesia at Parker Hannifin. He developed a passion for workforce and economic development after seeing so many of the great people who lost their jobs not be able to have a plan to be able to go toward that next path. He currently serves as a commissioner on the NC Works Commission. He has been a part of the Guilford County Workforce Development Board for over 10 years and now a part of the Durham Workforce Development Board. Jeff is passionate about this work, and it's really been wonderful to get to know him, and I appreciate Jeff and his organization passing a resolution to support My Future NC. So Jeff, come on up.
Thanks for that great introduction, Ray. I really appreciate that. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Thank you for that. Thanks for having me. I appreciate your warm welcome. It's a great pleasure to be here today and to be able to share in this symposium with all of you. As I think about the work that we all do as community college professionals, as workforce board professionals, and all the other affiliated folks and groups that do this great work, It is certainly nothing less than noble and honorable. As I was thinking about over the last few days, what in the world am I going to share with these people at a Finish Line Grants Symposium? And I labored over it for a little bit, and then I decided, we'll just talk about some words or things that resonate with you as you think about this work that you do, that you're passionate about, that all of the folks that you are going to be sharing time with, that they do. Because it's very hard work. As I think about workforce boards, they're composed of a lot of different constituents, business leaders, community leaders, educators, and those boards convene all of those folks constantly. There's also other groups that do the same thing, but it's very hard work. It really is like herding cats, right? But herding the cats is worth it, because when you get the cats all herded, there are people on the other end of that herding that really benefit from all of that energy and hard work. And so one of the things, if there's nothing else that you remember today, is that workforce boards, community colleges, when they get together and they herd the cats, what you see are things like Finish Line Grants, right? And those things represent opportunities for folks who may not otherwise get an opportunity, or they may have one shot at an opportunity. And if a car breakdown or utility bill or something, sometimes just as simple as having enough gas to get back and forth to where you're going, can mean the difference between the beginning of a world of opportunities and a lost opportunity, right? And so as you think about your work over the course of the rest of the day, I encourage you to really, really think about the amazing impact that you're going to have as a result of focusing on this work. And so now I'll get into just a few of the words that I thought about as I was thinking about my few minutes of time with you today. And one of them was fear, right? And I have a fear. My deepest fear is that I will miss an opportunity to help someone, right? I will miss an opportunity to do something, say something, be in the right place at the right time, think about the right thing at the right time to be able to help that one person who might need it at that time, right? That's always my deepest fear. And so as I approach everything I do, that is the courage by which I face it, right? It is my fear, but I have to face off against it with courage. The other word I'd like to focus on is opportunity, right? There are so many opportunities around us every day. You are here today because of a great opportunity behind the work of Finish Line Grants and other programs that are designed to help other folks have an opportunity, but you have seized the opportunity to gather together and think about, focus on, strategize about how to do that work. And so, again, the seriousness of you seizing the opportunity is critically important to a number of people who don't even know yet. They don't even know yet that you've seized this opportunity to help them. All right? The last word that I would leave you with is courage, and you just heard me reference it. And that is the emotional fortitude by which we have to approach this work. There are so many different variables and so many different players. As you look across the systems, as you try to do your work, as you try to identify resources, they are all over the place, right? But it takes talented people like all of you to be able to take a look at that system and bring it into focus for those folks that really, really need you to bring that focus to them. And I'll tell you one reason why. Because as you look at the person standing in front of you today, I started in 1989 as a youth program participant in Duplin County, North Carolina. All right? so I'm a local dude, right? But that was part of the workforce system at that time, right? And so I won't go through all of the time and the history and the opportunities seized and lost, right? What I will share with you is the opportunity that was provided me allows me to provide opportunities, or at least help provide opportunities to all of the folks that I try my best to not miss an opportunity to serve today. All right, so approach today well. I wish you luck, and thank you again. I almost missed an opportunity. So I hope you will forgive me, Alicia. Nervousness will get you every time. But I'd like to introduce to you a person who has also seized some opportunities in her day, Alicia James. Alicia is the Policy and Program Manager with the Institute for Emerging Issues at NC State, where her work involves community engagement, program development, and convening cross-sector partnerships. Prior to this role, she worked in state and local government, the North Carolina Office of State Budget and Management, as well as the North Carolina Administrative Office of Courts, and the City of Alexandria, Virginia. With a focus on budget, policy, and advocacy issues, Ms. James holds a Bachelor's of Arts degree in English and a Master's in Public Administration from UNC Chapel Hill. Welcome, Alicia James.
Institute for Emerging Issues at NC State, and we do a lot of work around convening cross-sector partnerships and different organizations that work together to address challenging policy issues that are affecting our state. And one of them is economic opportunity, and we have a forum coming up next month about reconnecting individuals to opportunities and really improving economic outcomes for people by connecting them to support networks, as well as post-secondary education. And so when we think about economic mobility, a national research study assessed several of North Carolina's largest metro areas with some of the lowest mobility rankings in the country, with Charlotte's being the lowest. So clearly this demonstrated to us a need for a statewide conversation around economic opportunities and how to connect workers who are seeking skill enhancements with employers who are looking to build or looking to identify a well-trained talent pipeline. And in terms of finish line grants, they're incredibly important because we know that there is a link between wages and education attainment. And finish line grants keep students engaged despite non-academic financial barriers that, without assistance, could very much jeopardize economic stability and even threaten enrollment status. These grants promote retention and completion so that students can obtain the necessary skills needed to compete for higher-paying jobs with upward career mobility. So that's a very, very, very high-level summary of our program. Next month, again, we are the Institute for Emerging Issues, the Emerging Issues Forum, and our focus next month will be on reconnecting to economic opportunities. We'll convene in Charlotte October 15th. If you would like to learn more, please join us. We will explore other education innovations and support networks to all individuals so that we can talk about ways to really create opportunity pathways for all North Carolinians. Next, it's my pleasure to introduce to you Jimmy Clark, who is Director of Lumina Foundation Strategy Labs, which provides state leaders with technical assistance for policies that increase higher education attainment. Mr. Clark has a bachelor's degree in history from the University of California at Santa Barbara and later earned his master's degree and a PhD in Education Administration from Louisiana State University.
Good morning, everyone. Ray, you set them off. They're getting lively a little bit. It's Liz gets the full credit. I want to do just a couple of things this morning before I have the distinct honor of introducing the keynote speaker for this morning's program. First of all is to extend my thanks to all those who have been a part of the planning of this effort. My first involvement started back in April when Jenny Owens in the governor's office asked me to come in to listen to folks who were involved in what was, to me, a rather strange sounding opportunity, this Finish Line Grant Project. I work around the country. I work on a number of different issues, and later this morning we'll be in a breakout session and I'll talk more specifically about what we do at Lumina Foundation with regard to strategy labs. But my involvement in the April meeting was such that I came away thinking, my goodness, what they're doing and attempting to do and actually starting to see, scalability of an emergency aid program, no one else in this country is doing it like this. No one is tackling it. No one is understanding the realities. No one is looking at the complexities, the challenges that are there. And these folks really are serious about what is happening. Obviously understanding and knowing the impact that it has on individual student lives, obviously understanding the reality of dealing with federal dollars, but probably more importantly is this alignment between workforce and post-secondary education in a way that no one else is attempting to do so. And so this conversation took place, and afterwards, or actually during the day, this concept or thought of a symposium was brought up. And for the next 3 months, I guess, there's been a group, I wouldn't say cats being herded, but there were 22 plus folks on calls every 2 weeks to talk about specifics for today. And so I am excited, personally, to be back in North Carolina, to listen, to hear, to see what it is that you're doing, both at the workforce board side and the community college side, how you are managing, how you think you can manage better, what lessons can be learned from one another. Peer learning opportunities are extraordinarily important. As I stepped back, I woke up this morning and took a look around, beautiful weather, and drove up. Extraordinary facility. So this is an amazing opportunity, I think, for sharing. As I mentioned, my colleague, Malia Seavey, who also works with me at the Illumina Strategy Labs, we are going to be talking about what other states are doing or not doing with regard to emergency aid or unanticipated needs for students. But I thought to myself as I drove over, I said, what an extraordinary opportunity, not only because of the topic, not only because of the alignment issues, not only because of the overwhelming support from the governor's office and others that are moving this, but the chance that you have to hear from one of the foremost leaders in the country with regard to community college efforts for student success. Lumina Foundation works on the premise that there will be a goal reached in 2025 that 60% of adults in America will have successfully obtained a credential of value. Obviously, many of those through a community college environment. Madeline Pumia-Rega has really stepped up to the plate over the last few decades. She's served in a variety of capacities in Florida. Your biography in the manual speaks for itself. She's the first woman and first Hispanic educator to lead the Florida college system. As chancellor there, she led numerous efforts that brought notoriety, I would say, to Florida in terms of what it was attempting to do, the innovation, the elevation of the post-secondary education sector. A lot of challenges, both in terms of the population being faced and the environment politically that she was working in. She has been a champion and leader over the last few years of developing what Florida's attainment goal has become. It's now known as SAIL to 60, and I'm sure she's going to speak to you a little bit about that. But what's important to me in terms of what SAIL is, it stands for Strengthening Alignment Between Industry and Learning. And again, I think that coming to this conversation, where you have workforce and community colleges to interact, to discuss, to understand more fully how together we can make a much more significant difference in the lives. You've heard folks talking about individual lives and what it means not only to them and their families, but to our country and to the economy of our country. One item that I haven't heard explicitly identified here today that I do want to recognize, and that Madeline speaks directly to this on almost every occasion I've heard her speak, and that is the absolute need to address equity gaps. We have not done this well in our country, and certainly North Carolina is not unlike any other state in terms of its either inability or lack of will to really discuss and talk about why certain segments of our population seem to succeed better than others. And we've got to look at it, we've got to address it, we've got to find the resources, and I honestly believe that this Finish Line Grant Program gives us an opportunity to really examine how we can really close equity gaps in a way that no one else has done so. So to me, I'm very, very excited now to introduce Madeline in a more formal or less formal way, I guess. The last time I heard her was actually here in North Carolina. I was at the Hunt Institute attending an event that was for elected officials, governors, and other elected officials. Madeline was on the panel, and quite honestly, of the 15 to 20 different speakers over the course of a day and a half, Madeline certainly elevated herself, captivated the audience, brought forth not only a vision and an energy that everyone recognized, but again, is a special gem for all of us. So, without further ado, Madeline, if you wouldn't mind coming up here to let folks hear firsthand what it is that you have done and are doing. I would end it by saying that although she was chancellor of the system that had 800,000 students overall in an extraordinary circumstance, she chose not to remain in that position. She chose to return to the campus. She chose to go back to do what she likes to do most, and that is to impact the lives of individual persons. And so, Madeline, I congratulate you and look forward to continuing to work with you.
Thank you, Jimmy. Thanks. Morning, everybody. No pressure there with that introduction, right? I know I'm among friends, really, because there's probably no better partnership in America than workforce boards and community colleges. For one simple reason, we are the talent and workforce engines for every single one of our communities in America. And for that, you should be applauded for being here together today. The only way our country gets to 60 is really with us in this room. There's no shortcut. We can't figure this out in any other way but rolling up our sleeves and developing programs like Finish Line. I want to applaud the governor and his team for having the courage, for having a bold vision and saying emergency grants matter. Understanding that most of our students that leave our colleges, it's not because they woke up one morning and decided to give up on their dream. It's because they woke up and couldn't get to their dream. Because they walked outside and the battery didn't start. And when that happens to any one of us in the room, we might call AAA, or we might have a friend. When it happens to one of our students, they have no one else. And so on that day, they miss class, and they might miss work. When 33% of them are not sure where their next meal is coming from, and 1 in 2 come from a low-income home, a program like Finish Line makes a difference. I think that sometimes in this world of technology and innovation, we dig so deep to redesign what works. Just last week, I was back on a college campus. Absolutely love. Talk about thinking and feeling like I'm back home. And we're working on an equity gap. And the team's been working on this, and they're developing all these frameworks. And then I simply asked a question. I promise I'll get back to the keynote. Did we call the students? Huh? Call? What? I said, could I get the list of the 100 students? I'm going to start calling them. No, we have a team. We'll call them. And I said, right now in my office. Everybody grab a phone, cell phone. And we started calling students. This is a high school in the poorest zip code in Florida. Graduates 294 seniors. About 130 go to college, and 102 come to our college. Of the 102, you know how many continue from fall to spring? 50%. And I'm thinking, do we have time for another framework? Do we have time for another study? How about if we call them? And so I started calling students. Everybody in my office is calling students. We got like a telephone marathon there. Some students are answering, some aren't. The ones that answer are like, are you serious? Are you really calling me? I've been going to class. One young man said, okay, I swear I was late a couple of days. Am I in trouble? I said, no, you're not in trouble. But then we found out math and science. We're into the third week of the semester. They're having trouble with math and science. Gave them over to the math and science dean. They're this week doing enormous amount of work with them. And why I say that story is because sometimes when you're writing those grants, and I want to applaud the Lumina Foundation and the Belk Foundation for recognizing that simple solutions change lives. When you're talking about the students that we serve and that come to your workforce, one-stop centers across the state to be served. And so the way we'll get there will be, yes, leveraging technology. Yes, developing and aligning our career programs with workforce demands. They're going to require multiple entry and exit points. Most of the students that come to visit you and come to our colleges are not going to have a linear 4-year university approach. But I will say this, at a time in our country that we keep focusing on college is not for everyone, it is still the single most effective driver of economic mobility. And applaud. Don't let any policymaker, any big CEO, I've sat in enough rooms to hear that and always raise my hand and say, is that the goal for your child? Because unless it's the goal for your child, it shouldn't be the goal for someone else's child. And so we can talk about maybe a 4-year university path may not be the only one. And it's us in this room that are going to have the solutions for when I talk about multiple entry and exit points. Our workforce boards in our colleges are going to have to be redesigned. Right now, some of our the way that we fund federal programs doesn't really match the type of multiple entry and exit points. At our colleges, we develop programs that take a little longer because then they'll be Pell federal financial aid eligible, right? We haven't quite figured out how to leverage prior learning into a high-quality certificate so that when someone comes to one of your workforce offices and comes with a wealth of experience, you're able to say it matters. That's going to be critical as we look at incumbent worker training programs. Many who have been at one of our colleges but didn't complete that credential. So how we work on re-engaging those folks to come back to college and finish. How can we package the experience that they have, wherever it's been, into coursework and credit work so we can accelerate the way that they complete? We probably look at Tennessee Reconnect as a model. In Florida, the governor just signed the Last Mile program. So if you have 12 credits or less to finish, you can come to one of our colleges and finish. And we'll provide you a scholarship, tuition waiver. In one of our counties, the workforce board and the college are partnered up together to do that. And the funding will come from both places. And so those are innovative practices to how do we have the students who are with us today finish? How do we re-engage those who left us to come back and finish? And then how do we continue to upskill those in jobs that tomorrow will not exist? For the first time in our country, automation and technology will have a net loss of jobs by 2030. Couple that with states' ambitious goals of getting to 60%. And so what's our path there? And I would tell you that any completion agenda that we think of needs to, A, connect early. Those early connections are so critical. We don't have time to have these places where we have that breakdown in connections, whether it's a connection from high school to college, whether it's a connection at one of the career centers into the college, or whether it's the connections of our colleges to our universities, and ultimately and most importantly, that connection to a job that leads to that economic prosperity. How do we redesign our models when we identify where those connections are lost to make sure we hotwire so that connection sticks? I think that when we think about academics, how do we look at pathways? How do we make sure that those pathways align? That it could start with a high-quality certificate. That many times, the last thing someone wants to do is come back in and take 36 credits of general education. It's probably not how we're going to keep them. But if we figure out what that first semester looks like, and by the way, for colleges doing pathways work, you start scratching your head when I say that. Didn't we just do all this pathways work? It's got to be lockstep. If you care about equity, it can't be. When we look at some of the academic pathways that we've created in an effort to have a clear GPS path, we are not taking equity into consideration in any way. And so how do we build those high-quality certificates that lead into an associate's, whether it's an associate's in science or an associate's of arts, that then leads into our universities? And that might happen 5 years apart. It might happen 10 years apart. It might just not happen in 2 years and then in 2 years. So how do we develop that academic support and program that allows students to come in and out? That'll come to you to upskill, and you know exactly where you can leverage the WIOA funds. If you think about WIOA and you think about all of the goals of now Perkins 5 and everything that I know many of you are right now dealing with, it's based on performance and accountability. That's not going to change. When we look at higher education investments and we look at workforce investments, everything comes with what's going to be the performance, the accountability, how's it contributing to that goal. The good news is we have a goal. The bad news is everything that we're doing needs to contribute to that goal. And when it doesn't, where does that program fall? And that's good news. It isn't really bad news. But we have models, both in higher education and in our workforce centers across the country, and really in all of our labor grants, that is a butts and seats model. And how can we shift our work to have an outcome-based model way before the legislature does, way before the feds do? How do we build those? And I would urge you today to think about how are you strengthening the partnerships. I think any completion agenda needs to have resources in place. And so resources like Finish Line is a perfect example. Setting aside money that says, if you have an emergency, we're here. If you're off course, we're here. The way that we deliver academic support, I think, is another place for us to begin to partner, and how we're then leveraging technology. How many working adults do you think are coming to your academic tutoring programs? To the workforce folks who you're advising every day into a career path, how many of them have time to give up what they're doing and come into our tutoring centers? How are we driving and using technology and Zoom and other things to help with homework at midnight when a working mom is probably doing her homework that needs to be turned in the next morning? No judgment. It's not the ideology of what we think, it's the reality of what happens. And then how do we align our resources around that? And I think the last piece is engagement. This is the beginning, right? This is just the beginning of how we begin to engage in our partnerships together, because I believe apprenticeships, work-based learning, and internships, we will have to figure out how we do that at scale. There's probably no better partnership than our workforce boards and our community college boards, and our workforce professionals and our community college professionals. Why? Because our boards are made up of industry. In your regions, you're setting up those jobs that are in high demand. At our colleges, we're developing those programs that are in high demand. How can we connect what needs to happen earlier or at the same time in ensuring that students have the skills, which is going to be the future of work? You know, when I talked to our colleges as chancellor, I always said that they felt that the biggest disruption was the legislature, right? We redesigned developmental education in Florida. We made it optional. And every time we were being disrupted, it was really policy. I'll say that the Uber of higher education hasn't arrived. And when it does, we're not ready. We know what the disruptions are: technology, artificial intelligence, automation, generational shifts in our workforce. We know in the middle what it'll require for someone to be able to have skills that transfer from job to job as their job changes: design thinking, problem solving, entrepreneurship, communication, applied technical skills, teamwork. All of those things we expect of each other. But I think that we still believe that the primary delivery models may stay the same. And that's K-12, higher education. We're starting to see on-the-job training, your rapid response dollars. Not at scale, but we're starting to see that. Apprenticeship programs, environment where we have for jobs that are $9 and $10 an hour, that'll fall to automation and pathway into finishing an academic program or earning a high wage. And so how do we align those investments to happen? If we don't, I think we'll see companies, you know, Uber disrupted the market because at some level, taxi cabs thought the medallions could never, ever be disvalued. Every time somebody attacked the medallions, they hired better lobbyists. They made more legislative allocations, right? They gave to more PACs until we, the consumer, devalued the medallions. No legislator did. Who did it? We did. Right? So now, I didn't have to worry if somebody didn't want to take my credit card. It was already on my phone. I didn't have to worry if you didn't want to upgrade your phone, your air conditioning in your car. I was already knowing what car I was getting in. And are we ready for that? And how do we balance the two? Both the digital natives coming to us, the incumbent workers that are not adopting technology as quickly as the digital natives within our own environments and framework, both in our workforce boards and our colleges that are, in a way, designed with antiquated funding systems and streams to meet America's need to have a talented workforce. The state that gets it right sees job growth and economic prosperity. The state that gets it right has and makes sure that they're closing, if not eliminating, the equity gap. The state that gets it wrong starts to put in folks into certificate programs to get credentials up and not wages up. And that would be a travesty. States that get it wrong implement enormous performance into performance metrics that shrink the opportunity for students in low-income homes to get a college degree. And so I think together we have an opportunity. We have an amazing opportunity to redesign our higher education system, our workforce system, to propel this country into exceeding in the global economy, not just surviving, but thriving, and most importantly, to ensure that the students who need us most in communities that are under-resourced, in our rural communities, have access to the education programming that positions them to take advantage of a high-paying job in an economy which will be driven by knowledge. Because that's where our economy is and is heading, to be a knowledge economy. So the days of completing a high school and going to the middle class are gone, as we know that. And we see it every day in our communities. And so how can we build those pathways along with industry to position every single one of our communities to prosper and to thrive? And so I want to pause because I want to keep us in time. I think we break at 10:25, and they wanted about 20 minutes for Q&A. So I'm going to pause here at 10:03 and give us a little bit of time for question and answer. And if I didn't touch on anything somebody wanted me to touch on. No questions, okay. As she comes up, also think about your human capital pipeline. Think about the human capital pipeline in 0 to 18. How are we building those strong pathways with early learning programs, kindergarten readiness, 3rd grade reading level, 8th grade reading level? How are we building what I like to call the pipeline in the works, 18 to 24? Those are the ones that we typically drive and redesign their experience at our colleges towards completion. When we think about completion agendas, we typically think about your 18 to 21-year-old FTIC student. How do we develop the right strategies for a pipeline from 25 to 64? And those include incumbent workers, those who have left us that need to come back and finish that degree. And then I think an area for all of us to think about, the 65 plus. How do we start leveraging that experience into sector-based strategies? And so it won't be this big strategy, but by sectors, where can we leverage that experience to elevate our work and to advance our impact? And so, again, being workforce engines and talent engines for our community, we also have to think about the human capital piece and how we develop and align and collaborate together to develop those pathways. And I'll take the first question.
Thank you. You mentioned that our pedagogic ideologies don't always align with student realities, and I couldn't agree more. And in thinking about how we organize support services around the realities of student lives, I find that the largest challenge is just sort of like changing the mindset of the folks offering those services or organizing those support services. So I was just curious as to any advice or success strategies that you could share around how we change the mindset about the ideologies of the people who are responsible for organizing support services for students.
It's a great question, and I'll say data, data, data. Jimmy alluded why I didn't stay on as chancellor. I joined the new governor's transition team, was asked to stay, and I was done. I felt during the time that I was chancellor, was really the most difficult time. Senate President was coming after colleges in Florida, and we somehow maneuvered and implemented performance funding and performance metrics that were both a win-win and accountability for the state, but also in what colleges were doing and staying true to our open access mission. We redesigned the baccalaureate pathways and approval process. We started the work and then finished the work and setting the SAIL to 60 for the state. And so I was being moved to really dig deep on this equity issue that, as Jimmy said, I kept talking about and I kept asking, but no one was really digging into it. So I went to the college in our state that has the largest equity gap, because why not? 51% of students at our college, if you're white, finish. 19% if you're black. So this fall, the faculty convocation started with that data. And I said, this isn't to punish. This isn't to be punitive. This isn't to hurt anybody. I just want you to give me a gut check if that's okay with you. And if it's okay with you, let's start having a different conversation. Because we have a couple of imperatives. If it doesn't move you socially on the social imperative, I got to check your pulse. But there's a moral imperative, and that's about your integrity and what we're about in this college. And the last one is the economic imperative. We can't continue at our colleges to say we're dream factories and we're opportunity nation and we move folks. No, we have to look at our data. Are we moving the needle for everyone? And moving the needle for everyone means you're closing the equity gap. And so that's, that was my first stab. And I have to tell you, I had faculty come up and say, not the best in their area, but they sit in the back of the room. And I was like, well, they are our students, so we can start with the language. That would be really good. And then he said to me, I'm going to ask them to move to the front. And I said, what if you flip your classroom and you teach from the back? Meet them where they are. He said, I didn't think about that. I said, okay, I just want you to think about it. And then I went to a humanities and communications department meeting as I was walking around the campus, and guess what they had on their agenda? I swear, I know they had to have that up. They didn't know I was coming to this meeting. Data. They were starting to look at the equity gaps in their own department. That's the start. This Thursday and Friday, there'll be open sessions at the college. It's design thinking, and it's redesigning the student experience. I've invited the entire college to sit one afternoon and design think an entire way that we serve our students. And on a Friday morning, capturing as many as our faculty as I could, having an afternoon session and a morning session. The work is monstrous because there's not a really easy solution. The only way out is through. But I think data speaks, and whoever delivers the data, it can't be used in a punitive way, but it has to be used to reach the heart, to reach the mind, to reach the soul, and then have the courage to make some of those changes that we know contribute to it. Hope that answers it.
Good morning. So you spoke about alignment between our education and our workforce. So at the program level, so what do you think are some good strategies for department heads or division chairs in working with the workforce boards and their community and their region to make that alignment happen and be successful?
So one of the things I would say, and it's a great question, and just to operationalize it, first of all, to look at your data in terms of where the economic opportunities are. Where are the high wage opportunities for you to create more talent? And then work back down into, is there a certificate to the associates to a baccalaureate? So I think about programs like Megatronics. Megatronics is probably a good certificate program that could lead into an associate's in science and engineering technology, or an associate's in science and engineering, and then a university pathway. Another perfect example of that, we've probably operationalized that in healthcare the best, is the CNA, LPN to RN to BSN. How do we do that in the technology space? How do we do that in the engineering space? And oftentimes you just have to admit, we're not going to develop that program. Sometimes the governor would meet with a business leader and they wanted this program, they were going to hire 200 people, and he would call me and I'd say, well, we're not putting it up. And he would say, what do you mean you're not putting it up? Please don't tweet this. I would be like, no. I said, because they didn't tell you what their entry-level wages are. He said, well, how much are they? And I said, they're $9 an hour. Do you know how much it's going to cost to put up a program to put someone for $9 an hour? We need to get CareerSource Florida to fund an on-the-job training or quick, rapid response, help them train their folks. But this is not a credential. This is a way for someone to get trained and have a job, which is important. Because if you have a job and you're inside a network and you're starting to, even if you're living in the Alice category of United Way, you feel you have a family, you have a community at work, you start to believe that you can do this. So a job is very important. But we don't have to develop and redesign training programs for those low entry jobs. We have to be real. That's a butts and seats model versus one that says, are we really leading to economic mobility pathways? And that's my best example to operationalize that. Any other questions? Perfect timing. So I will close with how I started, applauding you. Really, give yourselves a round of applause. I know how very busy you all are. While I've talked, you probably had 50 emails, 100 texts, because people think now I can just text and it's an immediate response. And you wonder, why do I have to come to one more symposium, one more collaborative lab, one more leaving the office and not doing the work? I know I feel that way. But I'm going to tell you why. I'll tell you why on a couple of reasons. Number one, it feeds your soul. The work we do is God's work. To wake up every single morning and be the champion for a population who is not sure where their next meal comes from, that are sometimes in and out of homelessness, that haven't met their true academic potential, that life gets in the way. And sometimes they self-sabotage themselves. But to wake up every single day and do it all over again is courageous, and it's the work of a big heart, and it's the work of God. And these meetings, they fuel our soul. They remind us why the work that we do is important. Don't ever forget that the 60%, the 400,000 extra credentials, are 400,000 families in North Carolina whose lives you will change, who you will break from a cycle of poverty into a cycle of prosperity, whose kids won't be the first generation to go to college in their families, they'll be the second. That one car or one illness won't wipe them and their families out. And so that's the first reason, is it fuels your soul. I hope that it feeds your soul and it feeds your brain, and it's important to be together with folks that are on this mission and this journey of changing lives every day. Second reason is I hope we get it right in a breakout session and you have the big idea. Like the curing cancer, why do they keep researching and researching? We need them to keep researching. We need the cure. Well, we need the strategy. All of us, every state and every community, every college and every workforce board needs a best practice to go back and try to implement and execute and take to scale. And the reason they happen is because you all get together in breakout sessions and maybe that idea comes, that solution comes. And so that's the second reason why it's important, and I applaud you for being here. And then the last reason I would say is just remember our work is incredibly important. You're not in it by yourself. There is an army of troops everywhere in our country working on these issues. And I know that we will change it, and we will absolutely strengthen our country for everyone to have that economic mobility pathway to prosperity and be able to provide for their families and themselves, and have the talent that America needs to have job growth and economic success. So thank you so much, and Godspeed.